You guys know that old riddle, right? If a bear shits in the woods and nobody's around to sniff it, does it leave a smell? Y'all know that old riddle, right? I mean, everyone's had to have heard that shit before. So if a YouTube auditor is nothing more than cheap programming that does absolutely nothing, can I still tell it to go fuck itself? Now, let's apply that logical riddle to Final Fantasy 13 too. If a game was a fucking disappointment after 6 years in development, do you really think people want a sequel to this shit just 2 years later? Hell fucking no. People do not want sequels to shitty games. People do not want sequels to stories that have closure at the end of a game. People want sequels to games that leave you wanting more. Final Fantasy 13 does not leave people wanting more. It leaves them wondering what the fuck went wrong with a perfectly good idea. I've said this in prior videos about this bullshit Final Fantasy trilogy Square Enix decided to make. I don't know, someone must have lost like a drinking game or was blackmailed along the way. But someone made the brain-fuckingly stupid idea of giving Final Fantasy 13 a sequel. On top of a sequel, they left it off as a cliffhanger to boot. It makes absolutely no sense at all from a business standpoint as to why you would give a disappointment of a game a sequel. Now, I'm pretty sure there was someone over at their offices who read all the reviews, read all the critique from gamers, from the media outlets, and the problems that this game had. Everything I've already mentioned has been widely mentioned in reviews of the game. Too linear, thinly veiled character struggles, awful emo moments for the main characters, and an ending that sort of makes sense and people just kind of accept it, you know, because there were other parts of the game that were more fucked up. Whoever the person in charge who saw all that critique got all swollen in the chest, pissed off that people didn't appreciate the game, and decided to prove everyone wrong and show that the game and the narrative can be improved. Someone got their panties in a bunch about that Final Fantasy game. Someone didn't like the fact that it was widely seen as the biggest disappointment in Western markets and made the decision to go ahead and create another game to show that Square Enix knows how to make a good Final Fantasy game. Instead of just letting that shit go and accepting it wasn't their best effort, someone's butthurt led to this bullshit in the background. Instead of following a very commonly understood principle of sequels, Square Enix wanted to defy all the odds. Good sequels do not come from bad original stories. Good sequels are usually set up by good stories, and in particular, the ending of the original source material. Sequels are either foreshadows, such as an open ending that leaves open questions, or some untold challenge yet to be achieved. Final Fantasy 13 had none of that. None! They told a relatively complete story in Final Fantasy 13. It had a beginning, a middle, an end, a resolution to their conflict, and the only open matter left to resolve was what would happen to Vanille and Fang at the end of the game. That's it. That's the only open-ended item the game had. But this bullshit sequel has nothing to do with that moment. I could have understood if the writers created a story where the 4 remaining characters tried to figure out a way to free Fang and Vanille. That would have been a more suitable storyline that matched what was needed. You know, similar to Final Fantasy X trying to give Yuna and Tidus some closure. But this game doesn't go that route. No, instead, they decide to all but change the ending of Final Fantasy 13 into showing that lightning gets sucked into a time warp or whatever the fuck. No, really. Final Fantasy 13 had an ending. Final Fantasy 13-2 starts with the premise that the ending we saw wasn't really the ending. Well, fuck me. Why did I play that game in the first place if that wasn't the ending? Final Fantasy 13 ends with Lightning all happy. Well, her version of happy, because she's like the Kristen Stewart mopey motherfucker with a dick permanently inserted up her ass. But happy that her sister Sarah was back. They defeated the gods who were screwing them over. They saved the planet. They saved millions of lives. They were fucking heroes. Yay me! This game says, fuck all that shit. It starts with some other god. You know, we just defeated some corrupt god, and now another one is fucking us over. That god decides she needs lightning for some bullshit, and pulls lightning into the future. By doing so, she fucks with the timeline of history. No, I'm serious. I'm not making this shit up. This goddess Etro warps lightning into the fucking future or another fucking world or whatever the fuck. I just wanted to block that shit from my memory. But anyway, she erases people's memory of lightning from the first game, and by doing that, completely fucks up the world and the timeline. So, had this goddess just minded her damn business and not fucked around with things, the world would have been fine. Yeah, great motherfucker. I just fixed the mess you corrupt gods caused in the first place. And now, I have to time travel throughout history or whatever the fuck this shit is to fix this story. You give me Lightning's kid sister, who I had to save in the first game, and this Kingdom Hearts lookalike motherfucker, and they have to jump through time period after time period, fixing shit this god is fucked up all to save Lightning. And of course, because that's not enough, they had to go one step further. They had to say, just to make sure that these games were linked together, that the ending of Final Fantasy 13, the ending that we saw that had a perfect 100% closure with the exception of Fang and Vanille being stuck in crystal, but whatever, we can accept that the goddess Etrel of this game was the force behind the ending of Final Fantasy 13. Well, if she was the force behind the ending of Final Fantasy 13, why didn't you show that at the end of Final Fantasy 13? No, they had to completely change the ending of Final Fantasy 13. They had to give it a completely new narrative to say that this goddess was responsible for that shit. Bullshit. Bullshit. She had nothing to do with that. You motherfuckers at Square Enix needed to link these shit somehow together because you wanted another sequel, so you roll out this piece of shit storyline narrative. It is fucked up. It has nothing to do with one another. In addition to adding Noel from the future, which made absolutely no sense, two other characters were added. Yule, who is some kind of seeress that is able to see into the future, the past, or whatever the fuck. The chick keeps fucking dying because she can see into the future. Give me a break, man. Then you have Caius, who's the dude wearing a black bodysuit with purple trim and a feather from his head. Honestly, man, I thought Seymour Guado from Final Fantasy X took the prize for the most flaming enemy in the series, but Caius just gave him competition. On top of that, they gave him this unnaturally deep voice that surely doesn't look like it comes from him. You know when you see someone and you can tell they're gonna have a certain pitch to their voice? Caius and his voice do not match at all. Caius got this extra medium spandex suit on and the voice doesn't match either. Seriously, something hugging your nuts that tight isn't gonna make your voice deeper. He's gonna have a much higher pitched voice than this game wants to actually portray. But again, because Seymour Guado was the most flaming enemy to date, they had to give this motherfucker some form of masculinity up in this bitch, man. But anyway, besides what this motherfucker is wearing, the storyline is beyond incoherent. I can't make shit up this fucking incoherent because my mind is too logical to make up this LSD mushroom-induced bullshit. Now, as you travel through time, moving anywhere from 200 to 500 years into the past or the future, you meet your friends again. Some don't age, some age like 4 years over 500 years. I find Snow in the future fighting off some monster. I find a 20-year-old Hope who's aged like 4 to 5 years. I find him 500 years in the future and he's some sort of genius. Meanwhile, in the next game, he magically reverts back to his teenage self. What the fuck? You jump from time to time fixing paradoxes and other bullshit that supposedly occurred when this goddess broke the timeline by kidnapping Lightning. In doing so, she released the chaos, as this game likes to call it. Looks like a big fucking dust cloud or tornado, whatever the fuck. You know, it's supposed to be the representation of evil energy. A big fucking fart cloud with black dust, because that makes total fucking sense right there. Now, let me just allow you guys to process all of this shit for a minute, because in talking about this shit, I'm starting to sound fucking crazy. Final Fantasy games rarely make straightforward stories. Final Fantasy 13 was confusing as shit from the start, but this game, this sequel, takes the cake. I mean, right from the beginning, the game starts off with some bullshit and then just continues the bullshit. By the end of the game, you're just kind of shaking your head expecting something else not to make sense. Playing this game and trying to understand its plot was like having a really weird dream. You know, it's like watching an elephant grow an arm to shoot pink Tasmanian devils off of rooftops while unicorns are then born from dead Tasmanian devils with Flavor Flav as the doctor. I mean, if I told you that, you would have the biggest what the fuck look on your goddamn face. Now, imagine that as the plot line to this bullshit game. That's exactly what the fuck just happened. As the game progresses, it spirals into more bullshit, and by the end, you just don't give a flying fuck about this shit anymore. You would have hoped that after all this garbage, maybe, just maybe, they would give you a decent ending that closes up the story with no more bullshit. Of course not! Why would they do that? Instead of cutting your losses and just ending this fucking story, they go the full bullshit route. I mean, you know about going total retard? This went total bullshit. To be continued. What? Are you fucking kidding me? You just put together one of the most incoherent plot lines of all time, and now you want to continue this fucking garbage in another game? You time traveled all around history, as if Back to the Future and The Simpsons haven't proven with scientific accuracy you just don't fuck with history and storylines. This game fucks with every single storyline possible. I mean, even in-game, they say that fucking with timelines causes paradoxes. Why? Oh, that's right. because the goddess Etro had to be a fucking cunt in the first place and pull Lightning into the future for reasons that make zero logical fucking sense. Square Enix honestly thought they can fix what was wrong with Final Fantasy 13 by adding the shit. I mean shit, if we're time traveling, why not go back to the period before Final Fantasy 13 occurred and you can fix all the problems that game had with just one fucking time travel? Fuck it. If you're gonna time travel, go to the time period before all the bullshit occurs. That's what really fixes shit. Don't just try time traveling and fixing all this other shit in the future. That's not gonna make any goddamn sense. This game was absolutely fucked from the beginning. Honestly, the story, the plot of this game are just awful. Absolutely awful. The gameplay itself is fine, but it's familiar since you have the same exact feeling for Final Fantasy 13 without the Eidolons or whatever the fuck those shits are. But the story here is utterly, incompetently incoherent. You retcon the ending of the prior game, use a random goddess that had her name mentioned maybe in passing in the first game, and her involvement, which was obviously thrown into the story to make it relevant, is the cause of everything that is fucked up. You know, I love me some Final Fantasy, but this is total garbage. Final Fantasy 13 was depressing enough, but this made it even worse. And what's really sad about Final Fantasy is that Japanese media will immediately praise the series and any game in the series without actually analyzing the shit. Case in point, two of Japan's top video game magazines, Dengeki and Famitsu, both gave this game perfect scores. Perfect scores, meaning it is one of the best games of all time. In European and Western reviews, every single one said the plot was a hot mess. Not a single perfect score outside of Japan. Matter of fact, most reviews of this game hover around an average rating. So, the gameplay is fun, but you don't want to pay attention to any of the story. And this goes to show you just how different Eastern and Western RPG games have become over the years. Japanese role-playing games have become incredibly incoherent over the years to the point that their plots only make sense to Epic Pineapple. This game was a perfect example of that bullshit. I can honestly say, of all the games that I have purchased, this was the one game that should have never been created in the first place. Final Fantasy 13 had small points of closure that were needed, yet this game has none of that. This game came up with a flimsy explanation as to why it should have been created in the first place, and ultimately created a storyline that made no sense whatsoever. If the goal of this game was to make Final Fantasy look like a better game, they certainly succeeded. If their goal was to make the shittiest game possible to show that Final Fantasy 13 could have been worse, they managed to succeed in that regard. But if the whole point of this game was to make Final Fantasy look better by adding a great storyline, they sure as fuck failed that shit with flying colors, man. Square Enix knows how to make good stuff, but this junk should have never seen the light of day. All they did was make money off of absolute bullshit, and I expect a whole lot more out of Square Enix. This garbage should be in a fucking bin, buried somewhere, and should have never seen the light of day. I don't care who the fuck made this game. I don't care who the fuck thought of this game. They deserve to be out of a job. They deserve not to be in the video game business ever again. This shit was just that fucking bad. Anyways, for those of you who've been asking, when do I plan on unleashing rants in this series? Now you got one. It's funny because a lot of people have been wondering, will I trash some of these games one last time before I actually say goodbye to my PlayStation 3? And yes, some of these games deserve to be trashed. If you sell trash, I'm gonna trash it. This game was fucking garbage. And I'll tell you right now, there's at least 5 or 6 other games that'll get the same exact treatment that this one got today. But anyways, tomorrow will be the conclusion and the absolute final video I will ever show on the Final Fantasy 13 series. I will never show another goddamn video on that bullshit again. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit. And tomorrow's video, Lightning returns. Fuck her.